Welcome to the Perspectives with Catherine Toon podcast.
Okay, everybody. I am very excited to have someone who's actually very near and dear to me, Pastor Zahnd, back on the program. Welcome, Brian. Welcome, BZ, which is so fun to say.
Thank you, Catherine. Good to be back.
Yeah. I have been enjoying your brand new book that you have that just came out. When did it first come out, your book?
It came out about a week before Lent,
Gotcha.
which was Ash Wednesday began on Valentine's Day, February 14th. So it came out about February 7th, something like that.
Well, his new book is called Wood Between the Worlds, and do not pass go, do not collect 200, just go get it in whatever format, because you got them in all the formats, because it is I love it, a theological poetry or poetic theology.
A poetic theology,
Theology, which is so wonderful because it's always greater than the sum of its parts. And we love theology, but we know there's only so far it goes in an intellectual capacity, and poetry has the capacity to lead us into mystery and without confinement, and that is beautiful. What prompted you to write this book?
Well, I tell the story early in the book where my wife and I have become long-distance pilgrim walkers here in our 60s. And we've walked now the Camino de Santiago, this 500-mile pilgrim route in northern Spain 4 times. But our first time was in 2016. And we began that walk by happy accident on Holy Cross Day. I don't think I was aware that it was Holy Cross Day. It's just what happened. And the first day is a hard day. You start in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, across the Pyrenees. All the pilgrims stay at one place because there's only one place to stay. And it's at a monastery that has a lot of large dormitories to house these pilgrims. And after we got settled in, I went into the chapel of the monastery, was just sitting there after my long day of walking, and my eyes fell upon the crucifix. And as I looked at it, I felt like the Holy Spirit gave me some instructions for this long pilgrimage that we were just beginning. And the instructions were these: enter every church you can, pay attention to the crucifix, ask, what does this mean? And don't be too quick to give an answer. And so that's what I did. For the next 40 days, 500 miles, seen different crucifixes every day, many times a day, just taking it in, seeing it, acknowledging it, paying attention to it, but not trying to instantly say, oh, I know what the crucifixion means. It means this, so that I could dismiss it. I just saw it. And then I would leave the church and continue to walk, but I would think about what I had just seen. And because I'm on the move, I'm not seeing the same crucifix over and over. I'm seeing a different one every time. And I began to realize that there are many ways to tell the story of Jesus Christ crucified. And I wasn't trying to be done with it and dismiss it and say, okay, of course I know what this means. It means this, da, 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 da. And then, okay, I'm all done. No, I didn't do that. And then I still waited, I guess what it was, 5 more years before I actually started writing on this. But I thought, okay, after that long walk, and then we'd done a couple more after that. And I kind of had the same practice of paying attention to these crucifixes. And then finally I thought, well, I see many things. Not just one thing, I see many things. And I wanted to then begin to write on the many things that I see when I gaze upon Jesus Christ and Him crucified. So that's the origin story of it, Catherine.
And that's so beautiful. And I love the mandate to use art, which is a form of visual poetry, to
Right.
minister to your heart. Just, when a lot of those were created, there's a lot of illiterate people or people that didn't
Sure.
obviously have access to scripture or anything. So it tells a story. And I love how you, in the book, it's a beautifully visually appealing book, and you include a lot of iconography and things that has different messages surrounding this, and it just adds such a depth. I was talking to you, Brian, before we went on, and I was talking about the coincidence or not so coincidence of this coming out during an election season in the United States. I groan when those come, but anyway, that's just, we can just minister to Catherine, but or anyone, but because so much of the message that you really do carry and has really been mandated is this concept of empire versus Christ and his kingdom, and what that cross represents in that. And I didn't know if you wanted to launch out with that, but certainly a pertinent and huge topic.
Yeah. Where to start? So, one of the things to understand about the crucifixion of Jesus Christ is that crucifixion was not rare and exotic. It, in fact, was disturbingly common in the Roman Empire. During the few centuries that the Romans occupied Judea, they crucified hundreds of thousands of people, not just a few. Around the time that Jesus was born, not far from Nazareth in the town of Sepphoris, which is 5 miles away, there was a Galilean Jewish uprising against the Romans, and the Romans crucified 6,000 Galileans. So crucifixion was common. And it was designed to be as graphic, as disturbing, as horrific, as horror-inducing as possible, because the message was, if you resist Rome, this is what will happen to you.
Don't buck the empire, yeah.
Exactly. And when the Romans crucified people, they crucified them naked. This is part of the shame of the cross, public nakedness. We can't even bear that yet today. And so in religious art, we don't depict Christ entirely naked. And I think that's, rightly so.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
But it is showing you that we still have that sense of that kind of shame. Well, the Apostle Paul does something very creative with that in the book of Colossians. He says that when the principalities and powers crucified Jesus, they in fact were paraded naked. They were stripped and displayed by the cross. So the shame of nakedness does not come upon Christ, but it comes upon these institutions. Understand that Jesus was
for what you are.
Yeah, Jesus was crucified under the auspices of religion and government. So his sentence came from the gilded sanctuary of religion and from the marbled hall of justice, and thus it has this air of legitimacy. To say it anachronistically, Jesus was crucified by church and state. And yet, what the cross now does is cause us to hold all of these kinds of institutions in suspicion. And we understand that ultimately what they're most interested in is preserving their own positions of power and privilege. And the cross, and see, this is why you don't want to reduce the cross to a single meaning. Right. Like we reduce it to a single atonement theory that we can write in a sentence or two and say it means that, and then close the book. Oh, it may mean that. That may be part of it. But the cross has a multitude of meanings. That's why I describe this book as a kaleidoscopic theological view of the cross. So we're looking at this source of light that is Christ crucified, and we see a particular design, colors, geometrics, and then we turn the kaleidoscope, and then it changes. We're still seeing the same source of light, but we're getting new meanings. And one of the things, in fact, that the cross does is challenge empires and their presumption, their presumptiveness, that we are wise and just, and we have a manifest destiny to shape history according to our agenda. The cross challenges and ultimately shames all of that pretension.
Yeah. I love when you brought up in that chapter, the ring of power, or about the ring of power. I can't remember exactly how you worded it, with this absolute power corrupting absolutely, and taking it into the Lord of the Rings, and how well that showed how that it's like it's too hot to handle. The ones that were presumably so good and powerful, like, no, we can't touch that, lest it defile, lest it we become that which, right, and pretty much our souls are destroyed, right? And you bring that out so beautifully.
Yeah, that's the chapter that's titled "One Ring to Rule Them All," and that was I remember writing that chapter. I thought it was, I don't know if this is the right word, but for me it was fun. I had fun writing that chapter simply because I got to work with Tolkien so much. And I remember I wrote that over a few days on it was summer or springtime, but it was good weather. And I was out on my deck, and that's where I wrote that over
Is that what you have?
Yes, the sycamore tree was right there, and I'm on this deck, and stacks of Lord of the Rings books and Tolkien books, and writing that. And so what in a lot of my previous work, I will contrast the sword of Caesar with the cross of Christ, and that's a legitimate, metaphorical comparison. But I thought, well, this time around, instead of saying repeatedly the sword of Caesar, which people may or may not get, I'm going to use a different metaphor. I'm going to use the ring of power, which a lot of people do get because of the popularity of the Lord of the Rings, both the book and the films. And so, what stands out in the Lord of the Rings, and by the way, I just want people to know, I have not yet, and probably never will, reach full Lord of the Rings nerd status. I could aspire to it, but man, there are people that are deep into that. I've read it 4 times. Okay, so that's I've read it 4 times, but there are people that have read it 40 times, I guess. I don't know. But one of the most resonant themes for me in the Lord of the Rings is the inability of the ring to ever be used for any good. You would have good people try to bear it, and then ultimately it would corrupt them. And so the great ones, Aragorn, Gandalf, Galadriel, they won't even touch it. And Gandalf will say things like, well, look, the way of the ring to me would be through pity. I would want to use it to do good, but I know what would happen. Once I had that much power, it would corrupt me. And then I would become like the Dark Lord himself. And so the wise ones, the only ones that can possibly bear it and have a chance to carry it to its demise at Mount Doom are the humblest of all, these hobbits. But even Frodo at the very end was unable to willingly relinquish it. It took the intervention of Providence. The only person, and this is, by the way, the one who is the true hero. I mean, we think of Gandalf and Aragorn and Galadriel and all of these. The true Frodo, of course, the true hero, though, of the Lord of the Rings, and Tolkien himself, by the way, said this, is Samwise Gamgee. Great. The simple, humble gardener. Not only is he just a humble hobbit, he's humble even among hobbits. He's just a gardener. That's it. And he is the only one that, having obtained the ring, I'm getting all Lord of the Rings. I hope people can keep up with us here. And Shelob's lair, he took it lest it fall into the hands of the enemy. And when it was time now to return it to Frodo after he'd been rescued, There was a moment when he was tempted, and it's more pronounced in the book than in the film, but he has this flight of fantasy that he could keep the ring,
Right.
and he could use it, and he would become Samwise the Strong, hero of the age.
Yes.
But that passed fairly quickly, and maybe can I just read a little bit of that
That
right
is so
there?
good. This is so life-giving. So it's good.
Let me find this page 92. I'm looking it up here.
Just take your time.
Here it is. Here it is. And this is actually right from the Lord of the Rings, and this is why Samwise was able to do what really no one else was able to do. Here, I'll give it back. And Tolkien writes, and this is right out of the Lord of the Rings. In that hour of trial, it was his love for his master that helped him most to hold firm. But also deep down in him lived still unconquered his plain hobbit sense. He knew in the core of his heart that he was not large enough to bear such a burden, even if such visions were not a mere cheat to betray him. The one small garden of a free garden was all his need and due, and not a garden swollen to a realm, his own hands to use, not the hands of others to command. Now, I think we should add right here, because I can imagine people saying, wait a minute, I thought this was a book about the cross, and now he's gone off and going all Lord of the Rings on us. Well, what I'm saying is, when the church reaches for the ring of power, it lets go of the way of the cross, and inevitably, in our pursuit of political power, we end up corrupted by it.
Absolutely.
So no, I haven't left the theme of the cross and having a chapter that involves a lot of Lord of the Rings stuff.
Yeah, and that's, but it's such a beautiful, just like we just cannot do it. If you grab a hold of the ring, you let go of Jesus. It's just what it is, and so it becomes your power, and you covet it, and then you get transformed into the image of this corrupt power versus the image of Christ. And
this is the character of Saruman in the Lord of the Rings. Again, film by its nature, it just has to simplify everything. If you want more complexity, more depth, then you read the book. And it's easy just, if you've only seen the films, you kind of think of Saruman as just a two-dimensional villain. And yet, we have to understand there's a whole history. He was once wise. He was once good. But somehow, he became infatuated with the power to dominate others, and then it corrupted him. And he's the most tragic figure, I think, in the Lord of the Rings. He continues to think that he's acting on his own, but he's at this point, he's no more than a puppet for the Dark Lord Sauron. And in the book, because I'm provocative in the book, I mean, I immediately then go from that to Patriarch Kirill, who is the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, very important cleric, very important Christian leader, who has become little more than a puppet for Vladimir Putin. And when I say that, I want people to know that isn't just me kind of spouting off, and that's my opinion. I want to tell you, in December, I was the only Protestant invited to speak at the Institute for Studies in Eastern Christianity, put on by Union Seminary, an Orthodox event. And I kind of wondered why they invited me, a non-Orthodox, to speak. And they said, we want you to challenge Kirill.
Oh, wow.
So they were asking me to do that sort of thing. So they understood that unfortunately this very powerful cleric has completely capitulated. Or as Pope Francis said, Patriarch Kirill must not transform himself into Putin's altar boy.
Wow. Ouch. Ouch.
Yeah.
And there's such an ouch in that.
You didn't know that Pope Francis could drop bombs like that, did you?
Hey, yeah, I guess we found out, but a bomb needed to be dropped, right?
Yeah.
In that way. Wow. And that's so true. And it's very sobering as we're sort of navigating, not just living life daily, but we have a political thing in the U.S. at least happening, and it's just an ongoing issue for humanity. and all of that. One of the other chapters that really spoke to me was your chapter on beauty, the beauty of the cruciform,
Yeah.
and how that.
A grotesque beauty is the
Yes,
chapter title.
yes. So feel free to launch on about that.
Well, this is one of the most remarkable things. We are accustomed to seeing artistic depictions of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ in terms of beauty.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go to the Louvre, you'll find, a lot of
Beautiful
crucifixes and crucifixion paintings. I mentioned in the book the icon that sits on this. I'm at my writing desk, and I mentioned this. This is my Russian Orthodox cross icon.
Beautiful.
That every book I write, the first thing I do is I light a candle in front of this, and then I go to work because I want the cross to preside over what I write. Now, as you look at this, I got this maybe, I don't know, close to 20 years ago, not quite that long ago, in Bethlehem from an icon dealer. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful.
Exquisite.
It's done in exquisite detail. You really need a magnifying glass to appreciate the fine detail of it. And so if you just look at it, you go, oh, that's beautiful. I mean, that would be a expected and normal response. Oh, that's beautiful, BZ. Well, yes, it is. But do you realize that there are 5 scenes here? Christ carrying his cross, crucifixion, taken down from the cross, burial, and then at the bottom, resurrection. Well, but the subject matter of 4 of the 5 scenes are of torture, crucifixion, and death.
Right.
And so how in the world have we been able to depict this in terms of beauty, and have we made a mistake?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if we had a journalistic, see, what happened on Good Friday didn't literally look like that, because that's beautiful. It wasn't. If we had a journalistic photograph of the events of Good Friday at Golgotha, and if we had that, we might look at it once, regret that we had, and never look at it again, because there would be nothing on the surface that is beautiful. It would be repugnant, horror-inducing. We would turn away. We would try to scrub that image out of our mind. And so have religious artists made a mistake when they depict the crucifixion of Christ in terms of beauty? And I say no, because the role of the artist is not that of the journalist. The journalist deals in the raw data. This is what happened. Here you go. The artist, their task is to alert us to what we may have missed. So, for example, a lot of people's favorite painter is Vincent van Gogh. His most famous painting in the Museum of Modern Art in New York is Starry Night. I think most people know what that is, with the swirls of stars and the yellow and the blue and all of that. It is gorgeous. Now, but here's the question. Is that a realistic, literal reproduction of what a starry night looked like? No. I mean, if you go out on a starry night, it doesn't look like Van Gogh's painting Starry Night. But what Van Gogh is doing, he's not a photographer. He's not an astronomer. He's an artist. And he's saying, hey, people, wake up. There's beauty all around you. And what we see on Van Gogh's canvas is what should occur in our soul when we behold the grandeur of a starry night. And artists who depict Christ crucified in terms of beauty are doing the same thing. They're saying, yeah, we know there was the crucifixion of a Galilean Jew under the governorship of Pontius Pilate on this particular day. That's the raw data, but there's more going on. The love of God is present. The mercy of God is present. God is saving the world. Christ is forgiving the world. And all of that is beautiful. And if the cross can become beautiful, then all things can become beautiful.
It's the apokatastasis,
I mean,
right?
He makes all things beautiful in his time.
Yeah,
apokatastasis. I'm glad you used that word. I just love that word. This is this Greek.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, you said it, and man, I picked up on it. I run with it. I love that word. It's a Greek word that's in Acts 3:21 when Peter is talking about
what the death and resurrection of Christ accomplishes, and he speaks of the restoration of all things, apokatastasis, that all it's what is meant when Julian of Norwich famously says, all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. That's apokatastasis, and that's what's accomplished through the cross. And so let's make it beautiful. And I think this should be clear, but I want to be on record as saying it, that whenever I speak of the cross or Christ crucified, I mean the crucified, risen Christ. I mean the cross in light of resurrection, because they're held together. They are, in one sense, they're a single event. I know they in time they play out over that 3-day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but theologically, spiritually, cosmically, maybe they're one thing. They're one event. Yes. And that's what the Orthodox, big O Orthodox, are very good in depicting in their icons. If you find an anastasis icon, this is Greek word for resurrection, it's very interesting how they depict it. It's not Christ stepping out of the tomb, rather it's Christ descending into the realm of the dead. Wow. And so what you have, let me just describe an anastasis icon. You have, it'll say in Greek, anastasis at the top. So it's saying the resurrection. But what you see is Christ descending into Hades, the realm of the dead, and the gates of hell, or the gates of Hades, have fallen beneath the feet of Jesus in the form of a cross. So it's speaking of the cross. The cross is the means by which Christ invades the realm of death. And so the cross, the gates of hell have fallen beneath the feet of Jesus in the shape of a cross. Around the cross and the feet of Christ are broken locks and chains. His robes are fluttering to indicate movement, that he's swooping down and then being raised. This is the language of Paul in Ephesians 4 when he's actually quoting from Psalm 68. He who descended is also he who ascended, and that he might make captivity, those held captive by death, his captives. But the most exciting thing about this icon is what Christ is doing. He's reaching out and he's taking hold of an old man and an old woman by the wrists, just grabbing them by the wrists and pulling them up out of their graves, out of their tombs. And of course, who is this old man and this old woman? Well, it's Adam and Eve, representing humanity, that Christ descends into death that he might lift us up into life. And thus the ancient early Christian hymn, still sung on Easter in Orthodox churches around the world, Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. Whew.
That is,
amen.
That'll preach. That is so good. And, we need this. We need this, that we're on our boots on the ground, where there's death, where there's whatever, knowing that we've been grabbed by the wrist, so to speak, in Christ. Yes. And have risen with him, and it's finished, it's completed, it's a now, and then the completion of it not yet, and we're in that tension. But that gives us hope, that gives us joy, that gives us inspiration. So in the midst of darkness, we can connect with the one who is light and love and truth in it, and that is the joy that we can get as we're meditating on this. Because if he didn't go down far enough, he would have left something behind. He would have missed a spot, right? But he had to go.
I love
deeper,
that. Amen.
Right, than our worst depraved abilities, which would actually create crosses as torture devices when our power is questioned or whatever. So right. That's gorgeous. I mean, that is beautiful. That is beautiful. And it's interesting because beauty in and of itself, and I've heard you talk about this, and I can't remember if this is in the book because I've paid attention to so much of what you've done, but you've talked about truth and beauty and goodness as kind of the trifecta that Plato had a revelation on, right? But these are things that inspire us and move. They're eternal. It's beautiful because Christ is love, and so he's lovely, and so he's eternally all that, and he's beautifying everything in its time. And that is such a hope and an inspiration in the midst of the down and dirty nitty gritty of that we
Yeah.
get our nose rubbed in on a daily basis. So yeah, that's beautiful. My goodness. Yeah, and you did write that book, Beauty Will Save the World. That inspired me early on before I even knew who you were yet. So I always
Yeah,
appreciate
there is a connection between the entire
Mhm.
book, Beauty Will Save the World,
Mhm.
that came out, I think, 2011
Yeah.
maybe, and the chapter. I'm compressing a lot of what I do in Beauty Will Save the World, the whole book, into a single chapter
Which is
in
hard to do.
The Wood Between the Worlds.
Which
Yeah.
is hard to do. But that's
Yeah, it is
beautiful.
hard to do.
Do you have a favorite? Like when you, or is there, I suppose probably you have a favorite until you see a different one and that's your favorite. But is there one that's particularly ministering to you as you've been staring at these crosses and just sort of communing?
I'll mention two, and they're both in the book.
Mhm.
One I have. Well, one I've seen them both, but in different places. I'll start. Which one to start with? I'll start with. I don't know if I can say it's my favorite. It's the one that's maybe I remember the easiest from our Camino de Santiago in 2016, and we were. This is early. This is like the fourth day or so, so we're still pretty early in walking this pilgrimage, and there was a place where you could take a little detour that would add a half a mile to your day, but it would take you up a steep hill to where there was reputedly a beautiful chapel. Now you have to understand, you're walking 12 to 15 miles a day, and you're not actually looking to add another half mile.
You got to really want it.
And
Yes.
especially a half mile that's steep up.
Yes.
But fortunately, and I think I probably have to give credit to Perry. I'm afraid the truth might have been that if left to my own devices, I might would have said, "Oh, come on, I don't need that." But she was insistent, so
Yes.
yeah, it was good for Perry. And I'm so glad we went up there. And there was this lovely small little church. There was a nun that was connected to the church in some way, who would ask you where you're from, and whatever language you spoke, she had a little pamphlet that would tell you about the church. The name of the village was Zalbaldika, and so we went in. It was lovely. It was shaded. There was a nice green lawn in front of the chapel. You could sit out there and rest your feet. But when we went into the chapel, at the far end, you see a crucifix. And I thought at first that, oh, look, they've depicted Christ crucified in a forest because there's all these green leaves around this cross. But as I walked up to it, it wasn't painted, and they weren't leaves. They were green Post-it notes, and that had been stuck all around the crucifix. And on each Post-it note was a prayer request written by a pilgrim.
Oh.
So you would enter as a pilgrim, and they would write this, and then put it by Jesus, and it's really, there's a picture of it in the
interactive thing. So did you leave your post?
Yeah, there's the
That's so great.
There's what it looks
Wow,
like.
there's been a couple pilgrims that have visited that.
Oh yeah. And actually, if you look really close, I don't know if people are going to be seeing this or listening to it. You can't really tell, but they are Post-it notes, but they've been cut into arrows in the shape of an arrow, so that you can maybe barely make it. Because on the Camino, you're just following what they call the fletches, the arrows, and they're always pointing you the way. And so someone went to a lot of thought about that, and that was beautiful.
It's inspired. So did you?
Yeah, and the other one is from Florence.
Sorry.
You want to put that back up?
Oh, no. I just asked you, did you put your Post-it up? Did you add to the collection?
Yeah, I did. I can't remember what I think I'm almost certain it was a prayer request for someone that I knew that was going through a difficult time at that particular season in their life. So yes, I did. And I've been there twice. When we did it again in I think the next time we did it was 2019, maybe. I can't remember now.
I,
And
not only speaks of
did it again.
the route that you were taking, but it also just speaks of where everything points to in the cosmos, right? It all
Yes,
points
yes,
to.
yes, yes. It all
Yeah,
works.
yeah,
That's right.
it's
That's very
beautiful.
good. Another crucifix, or this is a painting that really stands out in my mind, is in Florence. Of course, Florence is, Florence.
Yeah.
It's the city of art. It's the home of the Renaissance. It's the home of Michelangelo's David and Botticelli's Venus and the Duomo and all of these great works of art. But I have to be honest, my favorite art, and I go to art museums. When I'm traveling, if there's an art museum that's worth visiting, I visit it. That's just, I'm into that. But my favorite art in Florence is the San Marco Monastery that has all of these frescoes done by Fra Angelico. He was there for like 5 years, maybe I'm guessing about 1450. That's very close, in fact, somewhere around that time. And he made, and the monastery is just covered. I mean, just everywhere you go, the monk cells or the dining hall or their chapter rooms, they're just everywhere. He covered the place. And there's a particular crucifix scene that's above a dining hall. Let's see if I can find that one. This also is my own photo. This Christ with the azure blue background. It's kind of I've kind of zoomed in on it, and it's just above an entrance to a dining hall.
I mean,
but it's
only in Florence, right? Would that be above a dining hall?
Right.
That's perfect.
Yeah, it could be in the Louvre, but it's just above a dining hall. I mean, it's a fresco, and you can't really remove frescoes. I'm glad they didn't. And I've spent a lot of time looking at it, and it's peaceful. So you have Jesus, and almost all of the grotesque has been taken away in this case.
Yeah. So
that you have just a delicate little trickle of blood, a delicate crown of thorns, kind of bronze and gold, this deep azure background, and then this almost the hint of a smile upon the lips of Jesus, as enigmatic as Mona Lisa. And the effect that has on me is peace. And as strange as, and I'm not going to try to explain how, I don't know how. Look, we understand there are things that we know that do occur that we don't know how they occur. And I'm convinced that a fair measure of healing can come into people's souls by just beholding Fra Angelico's crucifixion. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but it's probably related to what Peter says, by his wounds, we are healed. When we bring our wounds to the wounds of Christ, it doesn't multiply woundedness, but tends towards healing. So those two stand out in my mind.
And that smile of knowing, I've got this. I've got this.
Yeah.
Whatever I've got it. I've got you. I've got I've got everything that you care about. I've got it. And just the masterfulness and the kindness of it, without gloating or without, whatever, pointing out flaws. It's just this capacity that's beautiful, and with the peacefulness of the belief.
See, and this is, again, takes us back to journalistic realism versus artistic theology. So if you had been there on Good Friday, I don't know that you would have seen the hint of a smile upon the lips of Jesus. But theologically, it's maybe this is what follows. It is finished. And there's this delicate, small, subdued, subtle smile. It is finished.
It's carrying the joy that's set before him, right? As he.
That's what it says in Hebrews. Beautiful. Yeah. So maybe in that moment he's stepping into that joy.
Yeah, that's.
See how you can have theological conversation around the very best of theological art. And that's what I mean in the book when I talk about it being a poetic theology of the cross. I don't want people to think it's a poetry book, because it's not. Poetry's there. I reference poetry. I put a little bit of my own in there, but it's not a poetry book. What it is, though, is an attempt to not be limited by the language of academic prose in talking about the cross. And so that's why the book is filled with references not only to poetry, but literature and song and film and painting, because I think these are very legitimate ways of exploring the theological meanings of the cross.
Yeah, and it ministers so much to our hearts because we bypass the intellect without throwing it away, but we
Right.
bypass it so that we are literally experiencing meaning that goes past our ability to define it intellectually or theologically.
I'm very respectful of the Theological Academy. I mean, I'm enormously so, and I read that work, and I appreciate what's done there. And I'm not bypassing it. I've read deeply. I'm just also, though, acknowledging that there are more ways of talking about the cross than just academic prose, which often makes it a barrier. Let's be honest. There are times in the academy where the scholars are writing for one another, and it's kind of a way to keep it above common language and, preserve their provenance within the academy. And I don't want to be too critical.
But we can fall into
Since
that
I'm
if
not
we
really
need
from
to.
the academy, I'm a pastor when the day is done. I want to be conversant in all of that, but then bring it to people. And sometimes the avenue to bring it to them is not in academic prose, but in other forms of communication, including art.
That leaves so much for the human heart to grapple with. That's beyond
Right.
words. And so, I mean, literally, it sounds like you're almost encountering these works and the spirit that is behind them, that is revealing.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. So those are your two favorites. What do you feel? I'm just curious. So we have these gorgeous, grotesque mixture of iconography and all that of the cross. How do you feel about when you come across, say, a Protestant version where Jesus is not hanging on there? Do you feel like it does violence to it? Do you feel like there's good revelation?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not going to be critical of abstract crosses that don't have a depiction of Christ. First of all, they're a lot easier to draw. Anybody can make a cross. So I'm not saying that's wrong to do. I'm not saying that at all. I will push back if somebody says, because I've heard this, they'll say, well, Protestant gets defensive and they think that, a crucifix is only for Catholics, and they're defensive about this. And they'll say, well, he's not on that cross. He's not on that cross anymore. I said, well, look, he's not in the manger anymore either, but I bet you have a nativity scene at Christmas.
Good point.
So he was on the cross. So what I will say, though, is that with an abstract cross, it's too easy for it to become abstract theology, abstract atonement theory. When you look at a crucifix, you go, oh, man, there's a story here, isn't there? A cross could just be a mathematical sign, as it were, in an atonement equation. A crucifix, it just kind of arrests you, and you go, wow, there's a story here, isn't there? I want to tell about the cartoon that I reference in the book. The cartoon is not reproduced in the book, mainly because I didn't know who the cartoonist was, so we couldn't find permission. I don't know if they'd have put it in anyway. Maybe not. I don't know. I think the cartoon is brilliant. I think it's profane and profound at the same time. And it helps us maybe recover the shock of the cross that we've lost because we've become accustomed to it. And the cartoon is this. 2 space aliens have landed on Earth. They've just got out of their flying saucer. They happen to have landed right next to a large, life-size crucifix by a roadside, the kind that you would find in Spain. And these two aliens are just staring at this crucifix. This is their first encounter on earth, and the first thing they see is a crucifix, and they're just staring at this crucifix. And one alien says to the other, you know what we need to do? We need to get the F out of here. That's what we need to do. And what that cartoon does is allow you to see a crucifix through alien eyes, people that are not accustomed to it. And they don't know what it means. They don't know the story. But here's what they conclude. A planet where its inhabitants erect depictions of a man nailed to a tree is probably not a safe place.
True.
And they're not wrong.
And they're not wrong. Oh, they're not wrong at all. Yeah, it has a lot of meaning for me. I know when I was a little girl, I'd had some God encounters because I needed them, but I didn't know the gospel or anything. And then we started traveling across Europe. And in the encounter, the only thing I knew, I didn't know who I was having an encounter with. I just knew that he loved me and I loved him. That was my theology.
Yes.
Right? That's good theology right there. So, but when we started traveling, and it was in Spain, I remember coming across one of these. I was, just, I don't know, hanging out and whatever. And it was actually on the bedstand of the bed, the headstand.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at that and I was like, that's the man.
Yeah.
That's the man that I had encounters with. So it was speaking in a way that I could grab it as a little 4-year-old. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What a great story.
Right. And so it's particularly meaningful for me from that perspective, because what that did, I don't have words to express it, but yeah, that's amazing. So, well, anything else that you would like us to take away from?
Well, the only thing I'll mention is the nature of the book itself is that there are 19 chapters, and then with a relatively long poem at the end. And these are 19 ways that I look at, 19 different things I see when I look at and consider Christ crucified. The one thing I really want people to try to do is get beyond the idea that the cross has a singular meaning. Just one dogmatic statement, you make it and you're done with it. And when I say 19, I don't mean that there are 19. I mean that the meanings of the cross are probably as limitless as the nature of God himself. And so I think it would be much healthier if we would just have an ongoing conversation about what we can actually discern in Christ crucified, and not try to reduce it to one tidy theory and then fight about it and then say my one lone theory is right and yours are wrong. I don't think I'm trying to set forth maybe a better way of approaching how we understand the cross.
And it's so beautiful. And so we're 19 and counting because this is so many different facets, and the concept of the kaleidoscope, where just a little twist, it changes everything you're seeing.
But it's still the same source of light. It's still the same light, but now with different refractions and different designs. Yeah.
How do you get a chance very often to, I don't know, bump into people in seats of power, that kind of thing, where you're able to, I don't know, speak into them? It's very hard, because they're holding the ring, right? So it's very hard to know how to speak to that.
I don't know. Yes or no. I for good or bad, I tend to avoid that. I received I didn't receive it, but it came to our church. I don't want to give out too much information. Let me see, how can I cloak this? A person running for governor in one of the largest states in the union wanted my advice on something or other about running for office. And I just graciously declined. I said, I don't have that kind of advice. I am a pastor, theologian, preacher, and I talk about Jesus, but it applies to everyone. And I'm just
including the ones you're running
wary
against.
of being drawn into that
Boy,
world.
I
And so I
tell you, and
try
it
to
is sucks can really suck you in, you know.
look, I've had
Mhm,
invitations to attend events at the White
mhm,
House from both
mhm,
parties.
mhm.
I get invited by elephants and donkeys. And I
Maybe
just
I
always
go in
decline.
between.
And it's not because I think that necessarily they're deliberately wanting to manipulate
Mhm.
me. Maybe it's more like I don't trust
Yeah,
myself to be that
yeah,
close, to have that proximity
mhm,
with power and not be influenced
yeah.
by it. It's we're back to where we started talking about the ring.
Right.
I just soon not touch the ring.
Yeah. A healthy distrust, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And maybe the distrust is in me.
yeah,
Maybe I distrust
yeah.
myself to get too close to power and not become infatuated by it. So I don't want to risk it, so I just stay away.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's true. It allures, unfortunately, and then we think we can handle it, and it handles us. So, yeah.
We all know that this is true because we've all seen it.
Yes. Yeah. We have. Now, do you have any other book projects that you're working on currently, or is this you just
Well,
launched
I
one?
mean, look, we're sitting here at my writing desk, and you can't see it, but my work is ongoing.
Mhm.
I'm writing a book. I'm supposed to be writing a book. What you learn is you can't really write a book and promote a book that's just
Yeah.
coming out at the
No.
same time.
No.
So my writing project is kind of on a
Mhm.
hiatus as I go
Yeah.
on I call this my Zoom book
There you
tour.
go. Thank God
You know,
for Zoom.
I'm not going places except I'm
Yeah.
here. Uh, I have a book. I have a contract for it and all, again with IVP, called Paths of Unseen Existences, the Pilgrimage of the Soul Toward Beauty, Wonder, and Heaven.
Ooh, very nice.
So that's what I'm writing.
Whenever that
I've got 2
comes out.
chapters done. I got a lot more to
Yeah,
go.
I get it. I get it. Yeah, it is. It is a journey, and you're right. You're just focusing on the one until that. So, what would you, if you are in your own heart, saying, I accomplished what I set out to do with this work, or what I felt like the Lord was leading me to do. Are you pleased with how it's been received? Or and I'm not just talking about sales. I'm
Yeah.
just talking about people's hearts
No,
and how
I
they feel.
am. I understand.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe I'll just speak frankly here. I am pleased with it.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty self-critical when I write, and so I tend to not give the manuscript. I mean, like I'll have editors say, "Can we see what you're writing?" And it's like, "No, I want to get done first."
Yeah, I'm like that too.
And I feel good about this
Yeah.
book. And I could find imperfections, and if I sit down and read it, which I actually do, when I think, well, I would have changed this or I would have added this, but that's ongoing.
Yeah.
You would never get done if you did
Editing
that.
never ends.
I feel good about it, and I'm pleased that it has been actually very well received,
Yeah.
and that makes me happy. I mean, how would it not make you
Oh
happy?
my
But
goodness.
there is that, because authors will talk about when they release a
Mhm.
book, it's like bringing a baby into the world.
Absolutely.
Well, yes and no, because no one has a baby and shows up somewhere with it, and they look at it and go, "That is an ugly baby. Why did you even have that baby?" But an author can get that.
Yes.
"Oh, I hate this
Yes.
book. This is terrible." So there is some. Fortunately, I've had almost nobody telling me it's an ugly
Oh,
baby.
well, praise God. That's beautiful. That's wonderful. Because they're so near and dear, and then you release it out
Yeah,
in the world, and
that's how you feel about them, almost. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, so where can they find it? To
I think find it,
pretty much
most
everywhere,
places,
Amazon.
and you can find me
Yes.
online. I'm Brian Zahnd, and I'm the only one. And so Google me, and you'll find, what I do in our church and my
Mhm.
sermons and books. You'll also find cranks on YouTube talking about, how ugly my babies are. But you just try to avoid that
Yeah.
sort of stuff.
Right, and that is the challenge of being public in any way.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Well, it has been delightful. I don't want to take up too much of your time because we didn't start directly on the hour, but thank you so much, Brian, and I'm so looking forward to kind of your next works. No pressure. You enjoy this everything about this. But it's always fun to see the next thing that you have. And I'm really grateful for what
Thank
you
you,
are
Catherine.
doing. It's beautiful. And I love you and Perry, and looking forward to seeing where the Lord is taking to you next. So do you have a plan to go back on the trail next year, or?
Not next year. We'll probably be later this year. We'll go back to England and walk some more on St. Cuthbert's Way,
Oh,
which is a shorter. It's like 70 miles. I mean, that doesn't sound short until you compare it to 500 miles. But I do hope to return. I want to do it again. You know, I'm only 65, or is that how old I'm
I think
65?
that's right,
And I still got some Caminos in me, so I hope to do it a few more times.
Wonderful. Well, this is lovely. And everyone, share this. Someone needs to hear this. This is going to touch people, and for sure get the book. And you have it in all formats for however it impacts people.
Yeah, I narrated it, which, it's arduous. That's an arduous task. It was 3 days in Chicago, and I don't know that I'm a particularly good narrator. I don't think I am, but it is my voice, and that's what people like.
Yeah,
so.
it is your
Rather
voice.
than having a professional narrator, they would rather have somebody like me who's not a professional narrator, but it is my voice.
It is your voice, and that actually lends itself to the work. I like to do my own too, but for better or for worse.
Yeah.
And
It is hard work, isn't it?
It
is for me anyway. I don't know if it is. Maybe it's easy for you. It's hard for me.
It is hard. It is hard work. You feel like you actually did something, and you're trying to pace your voice and be clear, and the pacing and all of that. It's a lot of work, but I'm so glad you did, because I enjoyed it in your voice. So that's wonderful. And I bought it multiple formats because I really just loved it.
Well, thank you.
Of course. All right, everybody, make sure you share this. Thank you once again, Brian. And I hope to have you back sometime.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Perspectives with Catherine Toon. For additional information and resources, please visit catherinetoon.com.